How did the world's most boring, basic, default flavor become the center of a violently guarded, multi-million-dollar international crime ring where farmers sleep in their fields with double-barreled shotguns? And, perhaps even more wildly, how are scientists now using literal cosmic rays from deep space to bust the bad guys in this criminal underworld? This is Critical Path, where we explore stories and innovations about our global supply chain that connect our world to your everyday life. When you hear the word vanilla, what comes to mind? Plain, boring, standard, the baseline from which all other exciting things are measured. If a car is vanilla, it's a beige sedan. If a person is vanilla, their favorite activity is folding laundry while listening to white noise. But the reality of the vanilla industry is anything but boring. It is, quite unexpectedly, a place of high-octane drama, botanical sabotage, and literal warfare. We are talking about a commodity so incredibly precious that it has literally been worth more than its weight in silver, yet so delicate and demanding that it requires a human marriage ceremony just to exist. The central problem of the vanilla industry is what economists and supply chain experts would call an impossible bottleneck. The entire world craves the complex, 250 compound aromatic profile of the natural vanilla plant, known scientifically as Vanilla planifolia. But this plant is essentially an evolutionary dead end. It absolutely refuses to reproduce without highly specific, almost absurdly niche assistance. Because 80% of the world's supply is squeezed into a single, cyclone-prone corner of the island of Madagascar, any disruption in the supply chain triggers a global panic. This panic turns peaceful gardeners into target-hardened sentries, and it transforms a delicate orchid into the world's most dangerous spice. To understand why the vanilla wars even exist, you first have to appreciate the sheer, agonizing, pull-your-hair-out difficulty of getting a vanilla orchid to do anything useful. Vanilla planifolia is not a bean. I know we call them vanilla beans, but that is a lie. It is actually a hemiepiphytic climbing orchid vine. It does not grow in neat, easily harvestable rows like corn or wheat. No, it is a diva. It clings to living support trees, called tutors, and snakes its way upward toward the canopy in the humid, sweaty shade of the tropical forest. For 3 centuries after the Spanish conquistadors first tasted the delicious beverage chocolatao with the Aztecs, vanilla was a strict Mexican monopoly. The French, the Dutch, and the British, the classic colonial empires who loved to sail around the world and take plants that didn't belong to them, all tried to steal cuttings of the vanilla vine. They took these cuttings and planted them in their own tropical colonies, from Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean all the way to Indonesia. And you know what? The vines grew beautifully. They climbed the trees, they flowered, they looked incredibly healthy. But they never, ever produced a single pod. The Europeans were completely baffled. It was the Great Barrenness. The problem was a tiny physical barrier inside the flower, called the rostellum. You see, the vanilla flower is hermaphroditic, meaning it has both the male pollen-producing part, called the anther, and the female receiving part, called the stigma, inside the exact same flower. You would think this makes reproduction easy. But no. The rostellum is a little flap of tissue that acts like a biological chastity belt, physically preventing the pollen from ever touching the stigma. In Mexico, nature had a solution. A specific species of tiny stingless bee called the melipona, along with certain hummingbirds, had evolved over millions of years to learn the secret botanical handshake to bypass this barrier. But outside of Mexico, those bees did not exist. So the vanilla orchids in Reunion and Indonesia were essentially biological virgins, just waiting around for a highly specific suitor that lived on the other side of the planet. Even in Mexico, the natural pollination rate is less than 1%. The impossible problem of global vanilla production was not solved by a fancy botanist with a PhD in a Parisian laboratory. No, the entire modern global ice cream and baking industry owes its existence to a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmond Albius. The year was 1841, on the French island of Reunion. Edmond's master, a man named Feriol Bellier Beaumont, had a vanilla vine on his property that had sat stubbornly barren for 20 solid years. Now, Edmond had previously been taught how to hand-pollinate watermelons, where the male and female flowers are entirely separate. So, applying the deductive reasoning of an absolute genius, this 12-year-old kid looked at the vanilla orchid and figured it out. Using nothing more than a thin splinter of bamboo or a blade of grass, Edmond demonstrated a technique that is quite literally still used to this exact day. He would carefully lift the rostellum flap with a little stick, and then use his thumb to gently press the pollen-bearing anther directly against the stigma. He bypassed the barrier. The locals started calling this delicate botanical procedure le mariage, or the marriage. But here is where the diva nature of the orchid strikes again. You cannot just walk up to a vanilla flower whenever you feel like it and perform this marriage. The vanilla flower only blooms for about 24 hours. Worse, the actual window where pollination is possible is only 4 to 6 hours long on the single day the flower blooms. If you miss that 4 to 6 hour window, the flower just gives up, withers, falls off the vine, and your chance at getting a vanilla pod from that flower is completely gone for the entire year. It is a logistical nightmare. Today, human workers have to meticulously monitor the vines, and a single skilled worker might hand-pollinate up to 2,000 flowers in a single day, rushing against the clock before the blooms close. The whole process, from planting the vine to getting a mature fruit, takes 3 to 5 years, and each individual pod requires between 50 and 70 human touchpoints, from pollination to curing. Because Edmund Albius's brilliant technique required massive amounts of incredibly skilled, meticulous manual labor, vanilla cultivation inevitably gravitated toward regions with large rural labor forces and the perfect, highly specific climate. That perfect climate is known as the terroir, and this geographical requirement led directly to the rise of Madagascar, specifically a tiny northeastern corner of the island known as the Save region. SAVA is an acronym that stands for the 4 vanilla capitals: Sambava, Antalaha, Vohema, and Andapa. This region is an absolute botanical anomaly. It sits on volcanic red laterite soils that offer the precise acidic pH and drainage that these finicky orchids demand. It receives between 80 and 120 inches of rainfall every single year, accompanied by suffocatingly high humidity and year-round temperatures locked between 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. This hyperspecific microclimate allows for the production of bourbon vanilla, which is the gold standard of flavor, known for its incredibly high vanillin content and that rich, creamy, sweet aroma we all know and love. Today, the Sava region is responsible for 80% of Madagascar's total vanilla output and roughly 60% of the entire world's supply. This concentration of global production in one tiny geographic pocket is what economists terrifically describe as a single point of failure. To put it simply, if the Sava region catches a cold, the global ice cream industry gets the flu. But getting the plant to grow and pollinating the flowers is only half the battle. When vanilla pods are finally ready to be harvested, they are completely scentless. They look like oversized, boring green beans. If you bit into one, you would be severely disappointed. That legendary, intoxicating aroma is only unlocked through a grueling, 6 to 9 month curing process that is equal parts ancient arts and hardcore chemistry. First, the farmers have to violently stop the growth of the pod. This is usually done by scalding the green beans in hot water. This kills the plant cells and kicks off a cascade of complex enzymatic reactions inside the pod. Next comes the sweating phase. The beans are wrapped tightly in heavy blankets and stuffed into wooden crates. In the sweltering tropical heat, they sit in the dark to ferment and develop their deep flavor profile. After sweating, they are laid out in the sun to dry for hours every single day, and then they are individually massaged by human hands to ensure they remain perfectly supple and don't dry out too much. During this absurdly labor-intensive spa treatment, the primary chemical compound inside the bean, known as glucovanillin, is converted into vanillin through enzymatic oxidation. The chemical formula for vanillin is C8H8O3. But here is the kicker. Vanillin is just the soloist in a massive symphony. Natural vanilla contains between 250 and 500 other unique aromatic compounds that give it its incredible depth. Synthetic vanilla simply cannot replicate this orchestra. It is literally impossible to fake the nuance. For decades, vanilla was a relatively stable, if somewhat unremarkable, commodity. Let us go back to the year 2013. Back then, a kilogram of vanilla cost about $50. That is a reasonable price for a specialized agricultural product. But by the year 2017, that exact same kilogram of vanilla hit a staggering price of $635. To put that completely insane price spike into perspective, the price of silver at that exact same time was roughly $530 to $550 per kilogram. Yes, you heard that right. A wrinkly brown bean grown on a vine in the jungle was literally trading for more money than a precious metal. This was the great silver flip. Why did vanilla suddenly become more valuable than literal silver? It was the result of a perfect storm of corporate public relations and catastrophic atmospheric physics. First, we had the natural pivot. Massive multinational food giants like Nestle, Hershey's, and Unilever all simultaneously made huge public pledges to their consumers that they were going to completely stop using artificial flavors in their products. They wanted clean labels. This well-intentioned corporate promise sent the global demand for actual, natural vanilla bean extract absolutely through the roof, right at a time when the global supply was already tightening. Then, Mother Nature decided to throw a colossal wrench into the works. In March of 2017, a devastating Category 4 cyclone named Cyclone Anawo tore directly through the Sava region in Madagascar. The storm was brutal, and it wiped out 30% of the entire vanilla crop in one fell swoop. Finally, we had the speculation spiral. Local middlemen and collectors, sensing blood in the water and realizing that the supply was critically low while demand is sky-high, began aggressively stockpiling beans. They hoarded the vanilla to artificially constrain the supply even further, driving prices to dizzying, unprecedented heights. The price went from $50 in 2013 to $250 in 2015, all the way to that peak of $635 in 2017. And this, my friends, brings us to the vanilla wars. Because when a burlap sack full of green pods suddenly becomes worth more than a farmer's entire annual salary, the neighborhood changes, and it changes fast. The stratospheric prices of 2017 birthed a brand new, highly violent criminal underworld known simply as the Vanilla Mafia. You have to understand, vanilla theft is not like some kids jumping a fence and stealing an apple from a local orchard. This is organized, ruthless crime. Thieves descend on these rural, isolated farms in large gangs of 30 or 40 men, and they are not coming with empty baskets. They are armed with long knives, machetes, and firearms. They strike in the dead of night, in what is known as the midnight harvest. And the absolute worst part? They do not just carefully pick the beans off the vine. Because they are in a rush and operating in the dark, they often just hack off the entire vine with their machetes, utterly destroying a delicate plant that took the farmer 5 long years to grow. They steal the crop, and they destroy the future. The psychological toll this takes on the farming communities is immense and heartbreaking. Imagine being a farmer like 58-year-old Jao Nasaina. To protect his livelihood, he and countless others have been forced to completely abandon their comfortable family homes. Instead, they move out into the middle of their dense jungle fields, living in tiny, miserable, mosquito-infested huts for months at a time as harvest season approaches. They become amateur soldiers. They patrol their vines in the pitch black, with spears and handmade pistols. They are constantly exhausted, knowing full well that if they fall asleep for even one single hour, their family's entire financial future could be violently harvested by a roaming gang. In rural Madagascar, the official police forces are often days away, and institutional corruption is rampant. The state cannot protect the farmers, which has led to a terrifying rise in vigilantism and extrajudicial justice. In some of these remote villages, if a vanilla thief is caught in the act, there is no phone call to the police. There is no trial. The thief is dragged directly into the village square and hacked to death with the exact same machetes that the farmers used to tend their precious vines. Reports indicate that at the absolute height of the price boom, an average of 5 people were being killed every single week in vanilla-related violence. This isn't just about losing a crop, it's about raw survival. For a Malagasy farmer who typically earns around $2 a day, losing a vanilla crop is not a minor business setback, it is a total disaster. It is a death sentence for their family's ability to pay for basic education and life-saving healthcare. Because you obviously cannot put a chain-link security fence around a dense tropical jungle, the farmers have had to turn to incredibly creative, homegrown security measures to protect their black gold. The most fascinating and ingenious of these methods is the vanilla tattoo. While the beans are still green and growing on the vine, long before they are ready to be harvested, farmers will take a small cluster of sharp needles and physically prick their own initials directly into the skin of the living pod. As the bean continues to mature and eventually goes through the curing process, these needle pricks scar over into a permanent, indelible mark. The farmers might carve a JB or an SN right into the side of the bean. What this does is create an analog, brilliantly simple traceable supply chain. If a thief steals those beans and later tries to sell a big bag of them to a regional collector, the collector is going to closely inspect the pods. When the collector sees the scarred initials JB carved into the side of the bean, and the guy trying to sell them is definitely not JB, the seller is in serious trouble. It might seem like a primitive solution, but in a rural region with absolutely no electricity or internet access, a physical tattoo on a bean is currently way more effective than any fancy digital tracking system or blockchain technology. However, the constant, suffocating fear of violent theft has created a massive secondary problem, known in the industry as the quality trap. The farmers are so utterly terrified of being robbed right at the finish line that they have started harvesting their beans prematurely. Instead of letting the pods ripen on the vine for the full 9 months, they pull them down at 7 months. They want to secure whatever money they can before the gangs arrive. But here is the botanical tragedy. Vanilla only develops its rich, aromatic complexity and its high vanillin content during those final 2 crucial months of ripening. When the world's primary supply of vanilla is harvested early, it essentially has no flavor. This leads to what the industry calls woody beans. These beans look like vanilla, but they lack the essential chemical compounds. International buyers, the big flavor houses and food companies, eventually realize they are paying a premium for garbage, and they walk away. This bursts the speculative price bubble, crashing the market and leaving the farmers even poorer than they were before. It is a classic, devastating tragedy of the commons. By trying to desperately save their own individual profit and protect their families, the farmers are inadvertently destroying the world-renowned reputation of their entire nation's brand. But the violence and the chaos in the vanilla fields are not just the work of desperate neighbors stealing from each other. The rabbit hole goes much, much deeper. This chaos is actually being fueled by a massive, highly organized criminal enterprise known as the Rosewood Mafia. To understand this, we have to talk about trees. Specifically, rosewood. Rosewood is highly prized for its beautiful color and density, and it is actually the most trafficked wildlife asset on the entire planet Earth. Yes, more than elephant ivory, more than rhino horn. Madagascar's ancient, primary forests have been illegally looted and clear-cut for decades to provide high-end, luxury rosewood furniture, primarily for the booming Chinese market. These illegal logging operations are run by ruthless syndicates known as the timber barons. But eventually, international crackdowns and stricter customs enforcement made it significantly harder to export giant, illegal logs of rosewood directly out of the country. The timber barons had a huge problem. They had massive piles of illegal, dirty cash, and they needed a way to move their money. They needed a laundromat, and vanilla was the absolute perfect vehicle. These barons used their existing, sprawling illegal networks, their fleets of trucks, their cargo boats, and their armed gangs of enforcers to muscle their way into the legitimate vanilla trade. They began heavily speculating on vanilla. They would take their massive stockpiles of illegal rosewood cash and use it to buy up vast quantities of the local vanilla crops, completely flooding the market with dirty money and driving the prices even higher. And the situation got even crazier in the year 2020. In an attempt to stabilize the wildly fluctuating market and protect the farmers, the Malagasy government stepped in and mandated a strict minimum export price. They legally declared that no vanilla could leave the country for less than $250 per kilogram. They thought they were helping, but the mafia absolutely loved this law. It gave them the perfect state-sponsored cover for trade-based money laundering. Here is how the scheme works. A mafia-connected exporter in Madagascar would officially ship a load of vanilla to a partner overseas, perfectly adhering to the government's $250 minimum rate on paper. But in reality, the actual, crashing market value of those low-quality beans might only be $150. So where does the extra $100 per kilogram come from? That extra money was actually their illegal rosewood profit, sitting safely in offshore bank accounts. The overseas partner would use that dirty money to overpay for the vanilla. By doing this, the illegal timber money was quietly repatriated back into Madagascar as a perfectly clean, totally legal agricultural payment for a shipment of spices. By the time the local authorities or tax officials looked at the accounting books, the money looked completely legitimate. It looked like the hard-earned profit of a simple orchid farmer, rather than the blood money of a chainsaw-wielding timber baron destroying the rainforest. It is an absolutely brilliant, infuriatingly effective financial crime, all centered around the flavor in your birthday cake. Now, because natural vanilla from Madagascar is so unbelievably expensive, so difficult to grow, and so wrapped up in international crime, the entire world is absolutely awash in fake vanilla. Prepare yourself for this statistic. Only about 1 to 2% of everything legally labeled vanilla on a supermarket shelf actually comes from an orchid plant. That means up to 99% of the vanilla flavor in the world is totally fake. It is synthetic vanillin. Humans have always been incredibly creative, and sometimes deeply disturbing when it to figuring out how to make things taste like vanilla without actually paying for the beans. Historically, there was a substance called castoreum. What is castoreum, you ask? Oh, it is just a chemical secretion meticulously harvested from the scent glands of a beaver. Yes, beaver juice. For a time, it was used to powerfully enhance vanilla and strawberry flavors in foods. Luckily for all of us, harvesting beaver secretions is actually quite annoying, so castoreum is now extremely rare and pretty much only used in hyper-expensive, high-end perfumery. Your ice cream is safe from the beavers. Instead, the synthetic vanillin we consume today is primarily manufactured from three main sources. The first, and most common, is guaiacol. This is a petrochemical precursor derived directly from crude oil. Yes, that cheap bottle of vanilla extract in your pantry is likely just a heavily processed barrel of petroleum. The second source is lignin, which is a structural material found in wood, and it is conveniently harvested as a massive byproduct of the industrial papermaking industry. And the third, rapidly growing source is biosynthesis, which uses genetically modified yeast in giant metal vats to ferment simple sugars directly into vanillin. In a particularly bizarre and hilarious footnote in the grand history of food science, researchers have actually successfully derived vanillin from lignin that was extracted from actual cow feces. So yes, scientists have successfully made cow poop taste like vanilla. But do not panic. Luckily for absolutely everyone involved, this particular method has not been commercialized for your morning iced latte. But here is the massive, mind-blowing revelation. How do we actually know? If synthetic vanillin is chemically identical to the primary flavor compound in real vanilla, how do customs agents, food scientists, and honest flavor companies know if the 100% natural Madagascar vanilla they are buying is actually made of hand-pollinated orchid beans, or if it is just cleverly disguised oil pumped out of a 100-million-year-old rock in Texas? The answer to this multi-million-dollar fraud problem lies in the high-energy physics of the upper atmosphere and the revolutionary scientific magic of carbon dating. This is going to blow your mind. Carbon comes in several different versions, or flavors, known to scientists as isotopes. The vastly most common type is carbon-12. But high above our heads, in the upper atmosphere, a very rare, radioactive version called carbon-14 is constantly being born. Carbon-14 is created when literal cosmic rays from deep space smash into nitrogen atoms in our atmosphere. Now, every single living plant on the surface of the Earth, including a delicate vanilla orchid vine snaking up a tree in the jungles of Madagascar, is constantly breathing in carbon dioxide. As it grows, it breathes in a tiny, predictable ratio of this cosmic ray-created carbon-14. This means that every single real, naturally grown vanilla bean on Earth is technically radioactively alive. It pulses with a tiny, measurable, isotopic signature of modern atmospheric carbon. Petroleum, on the other hand, is a fossil fuel. It is made of ancient plants and prehistoric animals that died millions upon millions of years ago. Because the radioactive half-life of carbon-14 is exactly 5,730 years, all of the carbon-14 that was originally in that ancient biological matter has long since decayed away into absolute nothingness. In the eyes of a physicist, oil is completely radioactively dead. It contains exactly zero carbon-14. So when a criminal syndicate or a shady flavor company takes cheap synthetic vanillin made from crude oil and tries to sell it at a massive markup as 100% natural Madagascar vanilla, scientists have the ultimate lie detector test. They take a sample of the extract and put it into a massive, highly advanced machine called an accelerator mass spectrometer. This machine literally counts the individual carbon atoms inside the vanilla sample. If the atomic count shows zero carbon-14, the scientists instantly know the vanilla is an absolute fake. It is a fraud. Think about how incredibly cool that is. You are literally using the power of cosmic rays originating from deep space to mathematically prove that a tiny bottle of baking extract in a kitchen is a lie. This specific isotopic signature is the ultimate unhackable security measure. A criminal gang can easily forge a paper label. They can bribe a corrupt border guard. They can launder money through offshore accounts. But they absolutely cannot forge the fundamental laws of nuclear physics. The cosmic rays do not lie. Despite these high-tech security measures and the astronomical prices the spice can command, the human toll on the ground in Madagascar remains absolutely devastating. The average life in the Sava region is one of extreme, grinding struggle. You have to remember that Madagascar is consistently ranked among the 10 poorest countries in the entire world, with a staggering 75% of the total population living well below the international poverty line. When the price of vanilla artificially skyrocketed, it introduced a chaotic phenomenon known locally as vola mafana, which translates to hot money. Imagine a desperately poor farmer who has lived on $2 a day his entire life, suddenly coming into a massive cash windfall of $20,000 after a single harvest. Because these rural farmers lack access to secure banking infrastructure, and because they are rightfully terrified of being targeted by the heavily armed mafia gangs, they often feel compelled to spend their entire vanilla windfall in a single chaotic afternoon. During the peak of the 2017 boom, the Sava region turned into a totally surreal landscape, populated by what the locals jokingly called Vanillionaires. It was absolute madness. You could walk down a dirt road and see men literally gluing crisp $100 bills to the backs of live chameleons, just to watch the colorful lizards crawl through the jungle bush carrying a fortune. You saw farmers buying shiny, brand new imported SUVs and expensive motorbikes, despite the fact that they literally did not know how to drive them and there were barely any paved roads to drive them on. One incredibly popular and bizarre display of immense wealth was to go to a shop, buy an expensive, imported luxury item like a flat-screen television or a high-end stereo, walk directly outside, and immediately smash it to pieces in the middle of the dirt street. They were literally burning the hot money. It was a psychological defense mechanism, a way to publicly get rid of the cash before it could bring the dreaded curse of the violent vanilla thieves to their family's doorstep. But there is an even darker side to this sudden influx of wealth, and it is found in the vanilla justice system. In the Sava region, the local prisons are completely overflowing, and they are filled with children. Kids as young as 12 years old have been arrested and thrown behind bars simply for being accused of stealing a few handfuls of green vanilla pods from a neighbor's field. Because of Madagascar's notoriously backlogged and broken prolonged pre-trial detention system, these young children can languish in prison for up to 3 straight years without ever once seeing a judge or having a trial. They are locked up in horribly overcrowded, unsanitary cells alongside hardened adult criminals. They often receive only a single meager meal a day. These children are effectively losing the most formative years of their childhoods, their health, and their futures, all over a basic baking spice primarily used to flavor birthday cakes and lattes in the Western world. It is a profound tragedy, hidden behind a sweet smell. And the ripple effects of the vanilla wars extend far beyond the human population. They are fundamentally reshaping the entire local ecosystem and threatening some of the world's most unique wildlife. Unlike traditional rice farming, which relies on devastating slash-and-burn agricultural techniques that completely clear-cut the forest and destroy habitats, vanilla is an agroforestry crop. Because the vanilla vine absolutely needs tall, sturdy trees to climb on, a properly managed vanilla plantation actually maintains the crucial forest canopy. In fact, ecological studies conducted in the Sava region have revealed something amazing. These vanilla plantations can actually act as vital biological corridors for Madagascar's critically endangered lemurs. The lemurs are able to safely travel and migrate between fragmented patches of deep forest by swinging gracefully through the branches of the tutur trees planted by the vanilla farmers. However, this is an incredibly delicate balance. When the global price of vanilla wildly spikes, the economic pressure to aggressively expand production becomes overwhelming. Desperate farmers begin clearing deeper into the protected, primary forests to plant more vines. Furthermore, the massive illegal rosewood logging operations that secretly fund the vanilla mafia completely obliterate the ancient, old-growth trees. They are destroying the exact same habitat that the lemurs desperately need to survive. The Queen of Spices is locked in a paradox. Depending entirely on how the global market fluctuates, the vanilla industry has the power to be either the rainforest's ultimate economic savior, providing a reason to keep the trees standing, or its absolute executioner. So where does this leave us? As we look forward toward the next decade, the greatest existential threat to the farmers of Madagascar might not actually be the machete-wielding thieves stealing their crops in the middle of the night. The true threat might be scientists standing in sterile laboratories with petri dishes. The rapid rise of biosynthetic vanillin is poised to completely disrupt the entire global market. Biotech companies have figured out how to brew complex vanilla flavors in massive stainless steel vats by using genetically modified yeast. Because these new biosynthetic products are created through technically biological fermentation processes, legal loopholes in many major markets actually allow companies to label this lab-grown flavor as a natural flavor on the ingredients list of your food. If this lab-grown vanilla eventually becomes perfectly indistinguishable in taste and aroma from the painstakingly hand-pollinated, sun-cured, bean-grown vanilla, the $600 per kilogram premium price tag will collapse forever. On one hand, a total market crash would finally end the violent vanilla wars, putting the mafia out of business and stopping the bloodshed. But on the other hand, it would completely, utterly destroy the single source of economic survival for over 70,000 rural Malagasy families. We are rapidly approaching a massive ethical and economic crossroads. The world is going to have to decide if it just wants a perfect, endlessly cheap, lab-grown flavor, or if it is willing to pay a substantial premium to keep a deeply human-centric, highly traditional, and forest-preserving agricultural industry alive. To wrap up this completely wild ride through the humid jungles of Madagascar, let's take a moment to recap the totally impossible problem we started with. How exactly do you provide a universal global flavor to billions of people when the biological source of that flavor is an evolutionary shut-in that stubbornly refuses to reproduce without incredibly intense human intervention? We have learned today that the vanilla wars are not some exaggerated Hollywood fiction. They are a terrifying daily reality, where desperate farmers literally sleep out in the dirt of their fields, clutching shotguns to protect a crop of black gold that has been valued higher than literal silver. We've explored the beautifully intricate marriage ceremony discovered by a brilliant 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmund Albius, without whom none of this would exist. We've witnessed the chaotic, surreal hot money sprees of the rural Vanillionaires gluing cash to reptiles. And we have uncovered the deep, dark, organized criminal connection between your innocent little cupcake and the ruthless, international Rosewood Mafia. But the absolute true revelation, the biggest aha moment of all, is that the modern battle for culinary authenticity is literally being fought at the subatomic level. Every single time you taste real, authentic vanilla, you are tasting an incredibly rare product that has been scientifically verified by the fundamental laws of cosmic rays and radiocarbon dating. It is undeniably the world's most expensive, most dangerous, and most thoroughly scientifically verified spice. So the very next time someone condescendingly tells you that a movie, a car, or a personality is just plain vanilla, I want you to stop them. Tell them about the exhausted farmers standing guard in the dark Sava region. Tell them about the desperate vanilla tattoos scarred into the sides of green pods. And definitely tell them about the complex nuclear physics used to track the authenticity of an impossibly demanding orchid. Vanilla is absolutely not boring. It is a high-stakes, shotgun-guard, economically volatile, interstellar miracle packaged neatly inside a tiny brown pod. Keep that exact same high energy the next time you pick up a spoon to eat your dessert. Because somewhere right now, deep in the humid jungles of Madagascar, a tired farmer is waking up in a mosquito-filled hut, gripping a handmade weapon, just to make absolutely sure that your spoon tastes exactly like the 1840s. Now we want to hear from you. If a major food company told you that their vanilla was completely grown in a lab by genetically modified yeast, but it tasted 100% identical to the real thing and stopped jungle deforestation, would you buy it, or would you still pay extra to support the human farmers in Madagascar? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos about the global supply chain.